There is a reason you are drawn to certain stories. A reason you feel something move when the hero falls, when the exile returns, when the seeker touches truth. These are not just old tales. They are not artifacts of the past. They are living patterns. They speak to something ancient in you that still remembers. Long before you had language for your suffering, you knew what it meant to wander. Long before you could explain your longing, you knew what it felt like to search. Myth speaks directly to that knowing. It bypasses the surface. It reaches into the deep where your life is not a list of events, but a sacred unfolding. Carl Jung believed that myths are not fiction. They are the psychic structures through which the soul understands itself. They are the language of the self. They do not tell you what to do. They show you who you are becoming. They carry symbols that mirror your inner landscape. And when you listen, something awakens. You are not drawn to myth because it is entertaining. You are drawn because it feels familiar. Because the journey of the hero, the descent into darkness, the return to the village with new eyes, all of it echoes what your soul is already living. Myth does not impose meaning, it reveals it. We live in an age that has forgotten myth, but the soul has not forgotten. It still dreams in symbols. It still reaches for meaning that cannot be measured. And if you are willing to listen with more than your mind, you will find that myth is not behind you. It is beneath you. It is shaping you still. Myth is not a story you outgrow. It is not a primitive way of explaining the world. It is a symbolic lens through which the soul perceives meaning. A myth is not about what happened. It is about what always happens. It is not a lie. It is a truth told in the language of image, rhythm, and symbol. Carl Jung understood that the psyche does not thrive on data. It thrives on structure. It needs form for what cannot be named. It needs metaphor for what cannot be measured. Myth gives shape to what is eternal in you. It offers a mirror to your deepest patterns of change, conflict, death, and renewal. Without myth, experience becomes flat. The pain you carry begins to feel meaningless. The desire that stirs becomes a distraction instead of a direction. But when seen through myth, these same emotions become part of a larger story. They reveal your place in something sacred that has always been unfolding. The psyche needs myth because it needs continuity. It needs to know that what it feels has meaning not just now but always. Myth places your private story inside the great pattern. It reminds you that your longing is not yours alone. It has been felt by kings, by wanderers, by prophets, by poets. You are not isolated. You are initiated. To live without myth is to float without gravity. To return to myth is to remember that the soul is not asking for explanation. It is asking for resonance. It is not asking for answers. It is asking for meaning. Myth does not fix your life. It reveals it. It does not remove suffering. It makes the suffering sacred. Carl Jung did not treat myth as a relic. He treated it as a mirror. He believed that myths are not just stories told by cultures. They are stories lived by individuals from the inside out. Every soul carries within it a myth in motion. Not written with words, but with images, with dreams, with the deep symbolic rhythm of becoming. For Jung, myth is the autobiography of the soul. It is not about history. It is about structure. It shows how the psyche grows, breaks, transforms, and returns. It tells the same story through different faces. A journey begins. A wound is revealed. A descent follows. And eventually, something is integrated that was once missing. This process is not fiction. It is the foundation of human development. Jung saw that the psyche unfolds not randomly, but in patterned stages. These patterns do not arise from culture alone. They arise from within, from the archetypes that live in the collective unconscious. Myth is how those archetypes speak. You are not separate from myth. You are living one. Your dream last night may be the next chapter. Your fear of failure may be the shadow you have yet to face. Your longing for change may be the call to adventure that you are still resisting. Jung did not ask you to memorize myths. He asked you to enter them. The beauty of myth is that it does not demand perfection. It asks for honesty. It does not shame your suffering. It places your suffering in sacred space. It reminds you that transformation is not a mistake. It is the natural consequence of meeting what is most real in yourself. Through myth, the soul becomes visible. We have been taught to separate fact from fiction, truth from story, science from myth. But the soul does not divide this way. The soul does not care if something happened. It cares whether something is true in a deeper sense. Not the truth of information, but the truth of transformation. That is the truth myth carries. Myth is not a lie told long ago. It is a symbol told forever. It reveals what logic cannot explain. It shows what structure lives beneath the surface of your life. You may not believe in gods or heroes, but you have felt what it means to descend. You have felt what it means to lose what defined you and rise again with different eyes. Carl Jung taught that the soul needs myth because it lives through metaphor. Without symbolic truth, the psyche withers. It becomes literal. It forgets how to feel depth. When myth is dismissed, the sacred is lost in translation. But when myth is honored, the psyche begins to breathe again. Symbolic truth is not concerned with accuracy. It is concerned with resonance. It does not care what century the story came from. It cares whether it mirrors your inner world. It asks whether you recognize yourself in the pattern. If you do, the story becomes a guide. If you do not, it waits until you are ready. Myths endure not because they are repeated. They endure because they remain alive in the structures of the psyche. They rise again in new forms, in novels, in dreams, in films, in the strange coincidences that echo ancient themes. They are not dead language. They are the architecture of meaning. To live mythically is to remember that story is not escape. It is return. Not to fantasy, but to the truth the soul already knows. The truth that suffering can change you. That descent has purpose. That something sacred is trying to find you through the story of your own life. It does not matter where you are born. It does not matter what language you speak. If you go deep enough into any tradition, you will find the same shapes. A call to leave what is known. A trial that breaks the surface self. A descent into the unknown. A meeting with the sacred. A return that changes everything. These are not coincidences. These are not borrowed themes. They are expressions of a deeper structure. A shared inner reality that speaks across cultures, religions, and centuries. Carl Jung called this the collective unconscious. It is not filled with memories, it is filled with patterns. Archetypal blueprints that shape the psyche from within. Myth carries these patterns. A flood that wipes the earth clean. A serpent that guards forbidden's wisdom. A journey to the underworld. A divine child born in obscurity. These are not only cultural symbols. They are expressions of universal processes. They describe what happens inside you when something in your life demands change. When you encounter these myths, you are not reading someone else's story. You are recognizing your own. You begin to see that you are not the first to suffer this way. Not the first to doubt this deeply. Not the first to walk through a season of disorientation. The myth does not remove your burden. It gives your burden context. In every culture, myth has served as the container for the sacred. It has helped people make sense of suffering, beauty, love, fear, and death. It has given shape to the invisible. When you honor myth, you enter that lineage. You take your place in the great human story that did not begin with you and will not end with you. To see myth as architecture is to stop looking for instruction and start looking for form. You are not being told what to do. You are being shown where you are. And once you see that clearly, the path begins to open. Not because it was missing, but because now you can walk it with awareness. Myth is not built from imagination alone. It rises from something deeper. It is the echo of archetypal forces moving through the human soul. These forces do not belong to any one person. They belong to all of us. They are the timeless patterns that shape experience, whether we understand them or not. Carl Jung saw archetypes as the deepest structures within the psyche. They are not inherited stories. They are inherited forms. They guide the way you grow, the way you love, the way you fall apart and are asked to begin again. You do not choose these forms. You awaken to them when life becomes too real to navigate without help. Myths give body to these archetypes. They make the invisible visible. When the hero sets out, the image carries more than narrative. It carries the experience of being called beyond comfort. When the underworld appears, it is not about geography. It is about descent into the self. The terrain is psychic. The landscape is emotional. The journey is interior. Every archetype has a mythic face. The mother who holds and also devours. The shadow that threatens and protects. The wise old man who guides and confronts. The divine child who awakens hope. These are not just symbols. They are living forces. You feel them not only in books. You feel them in your dreams, in your fears, in your longing to grow. When myth expresses these realities, it helps you name what you are already feeling. It offers language to your confusion. It shows that what is happening to you has happened before, not in the exact way, but in shape, in rhythm, in energy. You begin to see your experience as part of something deeper than circumstance. To live without this recognition is to mistake personal struggle for isolation. To live with it is to enter the symbolic life. A life where meaning emerges not because you force it, but because you allow it. Myth is not explanation, it is orientation. It reminds you that your soul is never lost. It is speaking in symbols. You only need to listen. The moment always begins quietly. You sense that something in your life no longer fits. A job, a relationship, a way of being. The old rhythm breaks. The familiar loses its weight. You do not know what is coming, but you know you cannot stay. This is the call to adventure. Not from the world, but from the soul. Carl Jung understood that every genuine transformation begins with a rupture. A crack in the surface life. A shift in the pattern. Something deeper begins to stir. You may experience it as restlessness, as anxiety, as the sudden collapse of what once held you. But beneath the discomfort, there's an invitation. A whisper that says you are more than this. The call does not come with certainty. It comes with mystery. It calls you away from the known. It asks you to release control. It invites you into a path that cannot be mapped ahead of time. You hesitate. You resist. This too is part of the story. In every myth, the hero resists the call. The ego always protects the life it has built. But if you listen long enough, the pull becomes stronger than the fear. Not because the path is clear, but because to stay would be a kind of death. A slow forgetting of what the soul once promised. The call is not a demand, it is a rising. A movement from within that no longer allows you to pretend. This is not ambition, it is awakening. The journey ahead is not about success, it is about becoming. The one who hears the call does not always know where they are going, but they begin. That beginning is sacred. It is the moment the inner story comes alive. The moment myth moves from idea to experience. No true journey of the soul moves upward without first going down. Every myth that matters includes a descent. Into the underworld, into the cave, into the forest where language fails. This is not a metaphor for sadness. It is the sacred process through which something false dies and something real begins. Carl Jung taught that this descent is not pathology. It is initiation. It is how the unconscious begins to surface. The structures that once held your identity collapse. The roles no longer work. The names you carried begin to fall away. You do not know who you are anymore, and this not knowing is holy. In myth, this moment is always present. The hero loses the sword. The guide disappears. The light fades. There is no map, only darkness. You are asked not to fight, but to stay, to feel, to allow yourself to be undone. The descent is not a failure. It is a doorway. It strips you not to punish, but to prepare. This is where transformation happens. Not in the surface victories, but in the breaking, in the surrender, in the silence that no longer avoids the truth. Here you meet the parts of yourself that were hidden. Here you face what was feared. Here you encounter what Jung called the shadow, not as enemy, but as teacher. The old self cannot return. But something new is not yet born. This in-between is sacred space. You are not meant to rush through it. You are meant to dwell, to listen, to let what must die complete its work. Only then can the next form begin to rise. The descent changes you, not through effort, but through depth. You do not come back with answers. You come back with presence, with humility, with eyes that see differently. The descent is not an interruption of the journey. It is the turning point. It is where the myth becomes your own. The journey does not end in the depths. It turns, it rises. Something that was broken begins to mend, but not as before. You do not return as who you were. You return as someone who has been changed by truth. Not the truth that explains, but the truth that transforms. In myth, this is the moment when the hero comes back. Not in triumph, but in quiet strength. They bring something with them. A gift, a treasure, a new way of seeing. A healing that does not erase the wound, but makes it meaningful. This treasure is not gold. It is insight. It is integration. It is the sacred within the ordinary. Carl Jung saw this return as the birth of wholeness. Not perfection. Wholeness. The reintegration of what was lost. The meeting of what was hidden. The ability to carry light and shadow in one breath. This is the goal of individuation. Not to rise above life, but to return to it fully. The gift you bring back is not only for you. It is for others, for your family, for your community, for the world that still believes only in surfaces. The myth has changed you, and now your presence changes the space around you, not through preaching, through being. But the return is not easy. The world may not understand you. It may want the version of you that stayed small. The gift you carry may not be recognized. This is part of the story too. You must protect the treasure until it finds its place. You must trust what has been born in you, even if others cannot yet see it. To return is not to go back. It is to bring what you found in the depths into your everyday life. To let the myth live in how you listen, in how you speak, in how you create, in how you stand in the world without pretending. This is renewal. This is integration. This is the sacred journey made real. You may think that myth belongs to the past, that it lives in old books, ancient temples, and distant civilizations. But myth is not bound by time. It appears wherever the soul seeks meaning. It speaks in the language the surface world forgets, dreams, images, moments that shimmer with quiet significance. These are its messengers. Carl Jung taught that the unconscious does not communicate with words alone. It speaks through symbols. It offers you images that rise unbidden. A bird at your window, a figure in your dream, a phrase overheard that feels charged with meaning. These are not coincidences. They are invitations. They are signs that a deeper story is trying to break through. In your dreams, myth comes alive. You find yourself in a forest with no path. You face an enemy you cannot name. You climb a stairway into darkness. These are not random fragments. They are mythic patterns. They reveal the stage of the journey your soul is living. They speak not to your intellect, but to your intuition. They call you to pay attention. In waking life, myth hides in moments most people ignore. You meet a stranger who feels strangely familiar. You keep seeing the same symbol wherever you go. You feel guided in ways you cannot explain. These are not hallucinations. They are synchronicities. They are how the inner world reaches into the outer one. Not to prove something, but to remind you that your life is part of a larger unfolding. To live mythically is not to reject reality. It is to see that reality has layers, that something sacred moves beneath the surface, that your experience carries echoes of a deeper rhythm. This rhythm cannot be controlled. It can only be honored. Myth does not promise clarity. It promises meaning. When you allow myth to guide you, you begin to walk differently, not faster but deeper, not with answers, but with trust. You understand that the dream may know something before you do, that the image may carry wisdom that logic cannot grasp, that the moment you dismissed may have been the most sacred of all. We live in an age of great access and great confusion. We can explain nearly everything, yet we struggle to understand ourselves. We have knowledge at our fingertips, but we lack direction. We know how things work, but we do not know why we are here. This is not just a cultural condition. It is a mythic crisis. Carl Jung warned that when myth disappears, the soul loses its compass. Without symbolic orientation, we drift. We mistake productivity for meaning. We confuse distraction for peace. We begin to believe that suffering has no shape, that desire has no purpose, that life is only a sequence of random events. The result is not just anxiety. It is emptiness. The loss of myth is not the loss of old stories. It is the loss of inner structure. Myth once carried the deep codes of the psyche. It gave names to the stages of becoming. It offered symbols for death and rebirth. It taught people how to face fear, how to carry grief, how to surrender and begin again. Without it, we are left to interpret everything alone. Modern life has given us freedom, but it has taken away shared language. It has left many wandering without knowing they are on a journey. Without myth, people turn to performance, to consumption, to constant reinvention. But the soul does not want reinvention. It wants initiation. It wants a story that can hold the truth of its experience. This absence shows up in depression that has no voice, in ambition that never satisfies, in relationships that fall apart because there is no deeper thread. It shows up in people who long for meaning but have no map. They are not weak. They are mythically starved. To restore myth is not to return to the past. It is to give the soul a structure for becoming again. It is to remember that life is not a task to complete, but a pattern to live. When the story returns, so does the self. And when the self begins to awaken, the journey becomes sacred once more. You do not need to borrow someone else's story to live with meaning. You are already living a story. The question is whether you recognize it, whether you can hear the shape of something ancient moving beneath your choices, your dreams, your pain. This is where personal myth begins. Not in invention, but in attention. Carl Jung believed that every person carries a myth uniquely their own. Not a myth made of fantasy, but a pattern that reveals itself through symbols, through crisis, through longing. It does not announce itself. It emerges slowly, through reflection, through deep listening, through moments that feel more alive than others. To recover your myth is not to decorate your life. It is to uncover its true structure. It is to see that the moments you thought were mistakes may have been initiations, that the fears you tried to escape may have been thresholds, that the desire you buried may have been the voice of the self calling you home. This is not a linear journey. It unfolds in layers. You return to the same symbols again and again, each time with deeper eyes. You realize that myth is not something you walk beside. It is something you walk within. The symbols are not just outside. They rise from within you. They live in your images, in your rhythms, in the moments that refuse to be forgotten. To live with personal myth is to take the spiritual path seriously, not as belief but as experience. It is to see your life not as a task but as a movement, a sacred unfolding shaped by forces larger than your ego and deeper than your plans. It is to trust that your soul knows the way, even when your mind does not. This kind of life is not loud, it is faithful, it listens. It honors what repeats, it blesses what breaks. It waits when clarity disappears. And in time, it begins to recognize that the journey was never random. That you have been living a myth all along, that the sacred was never far. It was waiting in the story you are becoming. You are not separate from the myth. You are inside it. You are shaped by it. You are walking through its stages even now. The call, the resistance, the descent, the return. These are not chapters in a book. They are movements of the soul. And when you begin to see your life through this lens, everything begins to shift. Carl Jung understood that myth is not something we visit. It is something we reflect. The myth mirrors the self. It shows us what we are becoming before we can explain what is happening. It shows us what must be released before we are ready to let go. It reveals what has been waiting within us long before we were willing to listen. This mirror does not flatter, it reveals. It may not show you what you want to see, but it will always show you what you need to understand. The characters in myth are not just symbols. They are parts of you, the warrior, the wanderer, the lover, the trickster, the one who runs, the one who returns. You have been all of them. To live within a mythic frame is to begin asking different questions. Not what should I do, but where am I in the pattern? Not how do I fix this, but what is this moment asking me to become? It is to see that your fear may be part of the descent, that your failure may be part of the initiation, that your silence may be the space where something deeper prepares to emerge. This is not about pretending, it is about perceiving. When you allow myth to mirror the self, you begin to feel less fragmented. You begin to sense that something ancient is watching over your story, not to control it, but to carry it. Not to impose meaning, but to invite you into a life that is not random, but radiant with purpose. Meaning does not arrive fully formed. It grows, it appears in fragments. It reveals itself slowly through images, through patterns, through the way certain moments seem to shimmer while others fade. This process is not intellectual, it is symbolic. And it is through imagination that the soul begins to make sense of its own unfolding. Carl Jung taught that imagination is not fantasy. It is the inner organ of perception. It is how the soul sees. It is how the unconscious speaks in symbols rather than facts. Through symbolic imagination, you do not escape reality, you deepen it. You begin to see that what you experience is not just literal. It is layered. It carries more than one meaning. When you live symbolically, everything can become sacred. A broken cup, a closed door, a repeated image in your dreams. These are not just events, they are messages. Not messages that explain, but messages that reveal. The symbolic life invites you to pause, to wonder, to sense that there is something alive beneath the surface. This way of living does not offer quick answers. It offers deep attention. It teaches you to stay with the image, to let it speak in its own time, to trust that what moves you, even if you do not understand it, may carry the exact truth your soul needs to hear. You learn to honor what feels charged, what repeats, what draws you without reason. Creating meaning through symbolic imagination is not a luxury. It is a necessity. Without it, the world grows flat. The sacred becomes distant. You begin to feel like a stranger to your own life. But when you restore the imagination, the world begins to speak again. The inner and outer reconnect. Life becomes a dialogue. Meaning is not given, it is made. Not by force, but by presence, by learning to listen inwardly, by letting symbols emerge instead of chasing conclusions. This is how the soul weaves myth from your experience. Not through explanation, but through relationship. Through the quiet work of staying close to what feels alive. You are not waiting for your story to begin. You are already inside it. Every moment you have lived, every choice you have made, every silence you have endured is part of a larger movement. Not random, not mechanical, sacred. The sacred is not somewhere else. It is in the pattern your life is becoming. Carl Jung believed that the deepest healing does not come from advice. It comes from seeing your life as meaningful. Not just in retrospect, but in real time. When you begin to see your story as myth, something in you shifts. You stop asking what is wrong with you. You begin asking what is trying to emerge through you. To see your life as a sacred story is not to deny pain. It is to honor it. It is to realize that descent is not failure. It is initiation, that confusion is not weakness. It is the soil where clarity takes root, that longing is not a flaw. It is the compass of the soul pointing toward what still matters. The story you carry is not borrowed, it is original. It may follow a universal pattern, but no one else will live it the way you do. No one else will hold your symbols. No one else will carry your questions. No one else will awaken in the way you are meant to. Your myth is not a performance. It is a process. To live as if your life is sacred is not arrogance. It is reverence. It is choosing to see with symbolic eyes. To listen for what returns. To pay attention to what resists language. It is trusting that the moments that hurt the most may be the chapters your soul chose to write before you ever knew their names. You do not need to understand every line. You only need to keep reading, to keep walking, to let the myth reveal itself one page at a time. The story is alive. It moves with you. And if you let it, it will carry you back to the center of who you truly are.